The countdown's gone from months to weeks. Now we're down to days, and we are inching closer to a Big Ten, a rare Big Ten opener in Minneapolis for the Buckeyes. Ohio State Buckeyes live for a 120th time. Where have you been? Hopefully you've been here checking out our weekly Buckeyes show here at the Voice of College Football. And if you haven't, you found a home, and it's good to be here right now. So lock it in for Buckeyes Talk for the next hour. Leave those comments and questions, debate topics in the live chat for Kevin Noon, Buckeye Grove on Rivals, top of the screen, and Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop. Boys, how we doing today?
Doing well.
Yep, doing great.
Good to see you. Good to see you for Ohio State Talk, of course, on a Thursday night, September 2nd. So we are just about 9 days away from kickoff with Minnesota Big Ten opener. All right. Since the last time we talked, CJ Stroud has been announced as the starter. He obviously had set himself up nicely. The last few comments that Ryan Day delivered were there's been separation, and then finally, bam, he's the starter. But Kevin, I will say, wasn't necessarily termed as the starting quarterback as opposed to he is the starter for week 1 against Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely get in and try and dissect words and try and figure it out. But honestly, I think that this is going to be a situation of where, the creating of the separation and now being named the starter, he's going to have some latitude. I mean, and Ohio State certainly starts off with a couple of real games, the road game at Minnesota and then home against Oregon. The worst thing you can do for a young quarterback is have him looking over his shoulder series by series or even game by game. Now, if you go out and you're not careful with the ball and you put it on the deck a couple of times and throw a couple of picks or whatnot, yeah, you have to reevaluate at that point. Ryan Day did not announce who like a number 2 is, whether it's McCord or Jack Miller. And then we learned as well that Quinn Ewers has been slowed with a little bit of a injury. We don't have a lot of details on that. He was expected to be back by the end of, I think it was this week. So since I don't think you have a clear delineation of, okay, this is your 1, this is your 2, this is your 3, Stroud's going to have some latitude out there. I mean, they're just not going to put him in a lot of bad situations. I don't think we're going to see a lot of stuff over the middle. I think we're going to see a lot of stuff outside the numbers. It wouldn't surprise me to see a good amount of ground and pound against the Gophers. They were pretty bad against the run last year, as I'm starting to do some numbers from last season for a piece that'll be coming up here on September 1st, tail of the tape. So they're going to definitely try and bring their quarterback along at a decent pace. With that being said, I mean, you can't completely go out there and spoon feed them and just put them in a situation of where you're not having any risk situations, but they're not going to throw somebody in a bad spot.
Yeah, and they like what he's been able to do in camp in terms of keeping the ball safe. Like Kevin knows, when we've talked to everybody, there's been very little mention of turnovers from the quarterbacks, so they're doing well there. His accuracy has really been good. They've been surprised by how athletic he is and how he's able to create, just be able to create plays and make the plays, get out of trouble and things like that, extend the plays, and then completing the pass once he gets out of trouble. And he was the backup last year, and so this is what everybody's been expecting. And I do wonder how much leash you give the guy in terms of if he struggles against Minnesota, throws a couple of interceptions in the first quarter or something. Like, you can't. It's a tricky situation with a new starter and a young guy to pull him and then put somebody else in, and then you start getting some musical chairs in there. Now you've got everybody thinking. So I do expect maybe a little bit of a conservative approach and run the ball, and you've got the running backs to do that. You've got the offensive line to do that. But eventually throughout the season, I think you're going to see the offense really open up with them because you have the receivers to do that with, and you have the quarterback that you believe you can do that with. Ryan Day was pretty happy talking about what they can do with CJ Stroud. So, first game on the road, maybe he throws for 180 yards. Next week, the week following at home against Oregon, maybe it's, twice that.
Yeah, I don't think Buckeye fans, of course, want to see what that leash is. If he just takes off and boom, he throws for 303 touchdowns week one, they win 45-17, he's off and running, and we never find out what that leash is and how close the competition is. Although Ryan Day, has been pretty clear about there being separation. So the initial competition, not super close, a definite winner of the competition here with Stroud, but going forward, where's the leash? There's something about winning versus losing as a quarterback that's different than the evaluation of, okay, we may need to make a change at left guard, where it's okay, if he lights it up, if the unimaginable happens, he lights it up and they lose 48-45 and he throws for 350, well, he's the starting quarterback. It wasn't his fault. But there's that they won 20-10 and he threw 3 picks and threw for 120 yards. But they won. So do you pull him and make a change? They won the game. Versus,
well, if you pull a quarterback, do you risk losing him mentally? I mean, how do you sit there and pull somebody game one and then cycle back to him game 3 or something? I mean, I don't know how you do that. I mean, I guess the only way you do that is if you go through all of your quarterbacks and realize that none of them are any good. And I don't believe that to be the case here. So, I don't see a situation of where we see pulling, but I do think we're going to have to see some situations, especially once Ohio State gets to round game 3, that they're going to have to spread some reps around and, in second halves and whatnot, and be able to get some of these other guys involved for a multitude of reasons, just to keep them involved, to have guys that have experience, because I've said it time and time again, the 2 years of Justin Fields, for one reason or another, Ohio State never really was able to use the mobility of Justin Fields, because he was always that one hit away from potentially being out, even though the couple of times he took those big hits, he was out for a play or two and then would come back in and throw a touchdown on the back end of it. But you were never able to, because the one year you had Chris Chugginoff and Gunnar Hoke as your backups, and then last year you didn't have enough practice time to get Jack Miller or CJ Stroud up to speed to be able to really bring them in a passing situation.
Yeah, I go back to the 2014 game against Virginia Tech. JT Barrett in that game was 9 of 29 passing with a touchdown and 3 interceptions. And they went back to him the following week. Now, was that more because of Cardale Jones not being a serious serious quarterback at that time? That year he said he wasn't really taking things seriously until about the week after the Michigan game, like leading into the Big Ten title game. And so, I don't know that they felt like they could rely on Cardale Jones if they were thinking about benching JT Barrett after that loss to Virginia Tech, but he bounced back and he was a redshirt freshman making his second career start. And, so there's some precedent for letting guys make some mistakes. And as Day has said, you can't learn without making mistakes. Now, the hope is that those mistakes come in practice, but that's an impossibility. You're going to make mistakes during the game. What Day has said is, when you make a mistake, I want to know what your thought process was, because sometimes there are mistakes with good thought processes. But when you're making mistakes and the thought process is way off base from what it should be, that's where the trouble comes in. That's when a guy might find himself on the bench. If he's telling Day something that is completely out of bounds in terms of what he should be thinking, then he could get yanked. But it would be some mental issues in there that would cause the benching, I think, more than some mistakes through effort or just good plays by the defense.
Leave it to Tony. Go into the archives. That's a great comparison right there in regards to, wow, that's a much worse effort. And I remember it well. And I think we all do, that for those that have a little bit of insight into football, didn't put that on the shoulders of JT Barrett. That was locking down the receivers and basically throwing the kitchen sink at him, a Virginia Tech defense that nobody had seen the entire offseason. And in any film study, they were really geared up for Ohio State and gunning for the young quarterback. Hello, Steve.
Good afternoon. Well, good morning. I almost said good afternoon because we usually do this in the afternoon, but good morning, everybody.
Steve Hellwagon, everyone. Bucknuts 247 Sports. Great to see you.
I had to get my ears lowered. I had
Okay.
an important appointment that I couldn't break.
Very nice. Very nice. Looking good. Looking sharp. Hope you're ready to deliver here. CJ Stroud, we're basically talking about the leash. What could that leash be? And of course, if he takes off, and we're never going to find out what that could be, but what kind of performance does that look like where Ryan Day is having to make a decision in week 2 against Oregon?
Man, I think Stroud is going to be given some latitude here, and I think you have to be able to give the guy some latitude to sink or swim. I mean, and I think he's going to swim, to be honest with you. I just think that the guys around him are so good that they're going to lift him up, and I think it's going to succeed, and I think it's going to work out regardless of what Minnesota might be able to do against them and then Oregon. I mean, these are 2 tough games right off the jump for him, and against 2 quality opponents. You'd really rather ease a young guy into it. But I do believe he's going to have some rope to work with, and they're not going to have him looking over his shoulder. And I think he's the clear number 1. I don't think anybody else is really on his level right now. And I think those guys, are working hard, but they're all young guys. And so I don't think it's an indictment of anybody or their development or where they're at or how good they're going to be or how good they are. I just think that's where they are right now. So I think it's his job, and he's going to go out and they're going to do whatever, however he plays, that's how it's going to go.
Talking Buckeyes football here, 120 times, 120 weeks we've done this with Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop. We got Kevin Noon, of course, from Buckeye Grove on Rivals, and Steve Hellwagon just joining us here from 247 Sports on Bucknuts. Please check out their work. We've got the best panel I can imagine. So Ohio State football talk, and of course, we are now in season. So be here, and the schedule needs to float at times. So subscribe. Hit that bell for the notifications. Make sure it's turned on. I've been educated on the bell for the notifications. It's become more complicated, I guess, on YouTube recently. So just make sure the thing's on so you can catch our notifications to know when we are going live each and every week. All right. Bring in those comments and questions. They're coming in, and we will catch up with them in just a second. Tony, let's go with the conversations you guys had this week with the running backs and Tony Alford. So the secondary is a big question. The linebackers are pretty much all new for the most part. So this running back core, I think, gains a lot of intrigue from the fan base in terms of what's going to happen. But it's filled with optimism that we're loaded. It's going to be good, but who's going to take control of it?
Yeah, and from what we keep seeing, it's been Mayan Williams repping first most of the time, which would lend you to believe he's going to be the starter this year. But I think you're going to see Mayan Williams, Master Teague, and Travion Henderson all being part of that workload. That's going to be the committee in my mind. And then throughout the season, does that 3-man rotation get whittled down to a 2-man rotation, or does one guy simply take it over? And I think Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson could do that. I don't know that that's what Master Teague can do. We've seen what he can do, and he said he's better. He's worked on his vision. He's worked on his agility in the offseason, which he wasn't really able to work on while he was rehabbing. So he believes he's better. But Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson provide more of the wiggle that is missing when Master Teague is in there. But there's a role for all of these guys. And I think that's going to be a very good room with an outstanding offensive line to run behind. And that's only going to make CJ Stroud better. But I think the biggest question for me is I'll be interested to watch Travion Henderson's carries as the season goes on, because it might be 6 against Minnesota, and then it might be 8 against Oregon, and then Tulsa, and it just keeps going up and up and up. And we'll see how long everybody can hold him off. And Mayan Williams is going to have a great opportunity to do that, because if he's the first guy, then he's going to be able to set the first impression and set the tone. And I know everybody's looking forward to seeing what he can do, looking forward to seeing what he looks like in the fourth quarter with 15 carries, 18 carries with a lather, because we've only seen him in snippets, and it's been good, but I think everybody wants to see more.
Steve?
I'm not quite ready to write off Master Teague just yet. I I don't know. And I don't know that that's even what it would be if somebody else started, because I think he still has a valuable role. I think he's proven that he can handle the load, handle the workload, and he's a good pass protector. And I know he's got limitations, or at least has not kind of stretched his boundaries with what he could show last year at times. And Trey Sermon was a much needed replacement, down toward the end of the season to kind of put him over the top, it seemed like. But to my way of thinking, I think there's a role for Teague. I think there's a role for Mayan. And I think there's a role for Travion Henderson, and maybe even for Marcus Crowley and Evan Pryor too. So I'm not writing any of these people off. I think that you have to it could be a committee approach, and that doesn't bother me. I know there's going to be people who say, oh, you got to get a guy in a groove. And until that 20th carry, no one's really in a groove. I don't necessarily buy that. So I'm interested to see, as I like to say all the time, interested to see how they're going to handle it.
Yeah, I remember, what was it, I think it was the 2014 season. They had 5 backs going into the season. We didn't know that Zeke was going to be Zeke, and things started to sort itself out. I mean, I think on that, wasn't Warren Ball and Breonte Dunn, weren't they part of the mix there? And
probably, yeah.
And I think Rod Smith was still part of the mix, and things start to work themselves out. I really think that Mayan Williams, don't call me meatball, call me chop or pork chop. I think that he's somebody that could certainly have an impact, but he's one of those backs that needs to build up a little bit of that lather. He's going to be better on carries 11 through 15 than he is 1 through 5 or 4 through 9. So, it's going to be interesting to see how they sort these things out. I'm curious to see what Master Teague looks like this year. Let's not forget, he was coming off of a pretty major injury from the 19 season. And then he gets thrown out there, doesn't necessarily have the run-up that these players are used to having going into a season. So people are so quick to punt on Master Teague. I think it might be a little premature at this point. I did a national radio show this morning where they asked me about the true freshman I'm most excited about seeing, and it is Travion Henderson. I think Travion Henderson is a difference maker. I think he's somebody who's going to go in there and take carries away from other guys just because you can't keep them off the field. But I'm not ready to sell on Master Teague yet.
People are enamored with a home run hitter, whether it be a running back or wide receiver. I saw a stat that I'm not going to be able to completely remember, but it was during the NFL Combine. They were showing the best wide receivers in the NFL, a list of all the guys that you would think of right off and where they rated, and they were not at the top of their class in regards to speed. So it's not all about speed. But Kevin, we'll stay with you because this kind of transitions right into the question we get in from AVI. AVI, appreciate the Super Chat contribution so much. Just how good do you guys think this year's offense will be in comparison to last year's, and how, if any, will it look different?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen record-setting offenses each of the last couple of years, and each year it's like, well, this is as good as it gets, and then it kind of gets a little bit better. So, I think that this offense could be tremendous. You look at that receiver room, you look at Olave, you look at Garrett Wilson, you look at Jackson Smith and Jigba, you look at throwing somebody in like Marvin Harrison. You look at the offensive line that they have. They're just so deep there. They have to find a way to get DeJuan Jones out there, that you're moving an preseason All-American tackle to guard, potentially, with Thayer Munford. So I think when you sit there and you have a situation of where you are able to start up front with a tremendous offensive line, an offensive line that probably will be among the best in the nation, should be right there for the Joe Moore Award, which goes to the top offensive line. You have a receiver core like that. I think they have a more than capable running back room, as we just kind of talked about the running backs. And I think that these young quarterbacks are going to be able to do a lot. So, I think that they could put up some huge numbers. But with that being said, let's remember, especially last year, Justin Fields was a couple years into his journey. Justin Fields was in his second year at Ohio State. It wasn't a lot of, we talk about maybe some limitations on what you're doing with somebody. I don't think that, I don't think we're going to come out here in week 1, week 2 and be like, this offense is going to put up 55 points a game. I think that it's going to be a little bit of a growing process, but I think once it's all said and done, I think that this offense is going to be very similar in terms of output compared to some of the other great offenses that we've seen over the last few years.
I think there'll be plenty of similarities to what we saw last year. I was just looking back, and each of the last 3 new starting quarterbacks at Ohio State, JT Barrett, Dwayne Haskins, and Justin Fields, the Buckeyes averaged over 40 points per game each time those guys were in their first year. And Ohio State's been over 40 points per game in 6 of their last 9 years. So at this point, I would expect the Buckeyes to score over 40 points a game, run the ball for about 250 yards, try to throw it for, another 250 and be that balanced offense that they always strive for. Sometimes that balance leads to 300 yards rushing or 300 yards passing. It's not necessarily that they want to be split, but they just want to be able to do whatever they want, whenever they want. And I think that's the kind of offense they have, because the thing is, they've got the running game, they've got the offensive line, they've got the receivers. All that they're missing, and they may not be missing it, is the quarterback, because he's going to have time to throw. He's going to have guys to throw to. The defense is going to have to be focused on the running game. So there's really no need for any big changes, because everything is set up for this quarterback to look just like quarterbacks of the past. And maybe there's a little bit more running. I still think you have to have the threat of the run, because when they didn't have that in 2018, you saw how it negatively impacted J.K. Dobbins, who became an average running back. And we know that he's not average. And so having C.J. Stroud with that threat to run makes the offense even better. So they'll be the best offense in the Big Ten, one of the, top 10 offenses in the Power 5 in terms of, just being able to do whatever they want, whenever they want. But then they have to also then be able to do it in January, which will be the real test.
Yeah, they don't need a record-setting offense this year. What they need is vast improvement on defense for the overall picture to be better in the end. And, of course, they only lost the 1 game last year to Alabama. So even with how suspect the defense was, they were still able to win games. But some of that margin for error will be gone this year, because I don't look for them to be quite as explosive or productive on offense. They're going to be really good. And I think Tony's hit the nail on the head. Around 40 points or more, 250 yards rushing will be the goal. And if they can get to 250 yards passing, then so be it. They're going to find ways to create offense and create production. And honestly, until we see Stroud in a game, we're just kind of, feeling our way through the dark here, because it's such an unknown. You just don't know how he's going to respond to what he's going to see. Is he going to read and react and make proper calls and put the ball where it's supposed to go? Coach Day has said all the right things about what Stroud has showed them in practice, but is he also turning it over 2-3 times a day? We don't know that. So are the other guys turning it over 4 times a day? We don't know that. So and is he the best by default? We don't know, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. It seems like he's answered the bell and done everything that they wanted him to do. So it looks like he's going to do a good job. And again, I think you just have to go into the first game with an open mind and just see where it takes them, what the defense gives them, how they take advantage of it, and how they put points on the board. I think it's going to be an interesting case study, certainly, of what happens when you lose a quarterback as accomplished as Fields, and you have to turn that corner to the next guy or guys and what it looks like.
Caught a stat during the Monday night game last night that Urban Meyer was trailing in this ball game in the preseason game by 20 points, that he trailed in 3 games at Ohio State by 20 points. They came quickly to mind, of course. Clemson, Purdue, Iowa would have had to been the 3. So not in that position very many times, but he's finding it a little different there in Jacksonville right now, talking about offense, because you got to block some people up front. So that's what they're experiencing now. So we're going to devote the last roughly 15 minutes to Minnesota matchup talk with Daniel House coming in from Gophers Guru. And I would like you three to shoot questions at him once we get his initial take. So I want to make sure that before we move on to any other positions, that we get some discussion in on this proposed Big Ten ACC Pac-12 alliance, Tony. We have heard some vague terminology dealing with philosophy and academics and obviously revenue opportunities. But the one that you can kind of get your teeth into a little bit is scheduling. So what do you think this is really going to look like once it's announced?
Well, I know there's a bunch of concerns about how are all of these teams in these conferences going to back out of all of these out of non-conference games that they have. But I say just scrap. Big Ten can go back to eight conference games, and then that add a Pac-12 team and an ACC team, and I think that's an easy solution, an easy fix. I think they should do that if they want to all join together. Like, you got to make it beneficial for everybody, and that's one way to do it. And for me, this is, I know everybody keeps saying it's a power play against the SEC. It feels like it's as much a power play against ESPN, in my opinion, so that ESPN doesn't get like the full rights or the the full negotiating rights to an early cancellation of the existing contract. And so they the Big Ten, ACC, the Pac-12 want to open it up to everybody. And it's interesting to me that the ACC is part of this, being a partner with ESPN, but they also know that they have the worst contract with ESPN, and so and then you feel terrible for the Big 12, who has talked to other conferences, and the other conferences are no longer picking up the phone when Bob Bowlesby calls. So you feel a little bit bad there, but I think the scheduling is the easiest fix. It's an interesting fix. It's a good fix. Like, I wouldn't mind an Ohio State schedule one year that that they travel to North Carolina, and the next year that same year they're hosting Washington and stuff like that. And I know they're not going to want it to load it up too much, but if you have a 12-team playoff, go ahead and load it up. If you win the conference, you're in.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of a survival mentality, I think, from these three conferences. The SEC has obviously struck a huge blow and now has control, so to speak, of the direction of college football in many ways. With the addition of Texas and Oklahoma, they're going to command just so much attention, and their TV contracts are going to be extremely bloated and these kind of things. One of the things that I hear here is that they want to go back to 8 conference games, and the Big Ten went to 9 conference games because that was the best thing for the Big Ten network, which they are a 49% partner in. It created more compelling content. If you want to consider Rutgers against Minnesota as compelling content, it's much more compelling content than Rutgers against Temple, but because it is, quote unquote, a Big Ten game, at least in name only, that 9th conference game. So that was why they did that. It created more value and more Big Ten conference games for the television partners to increase the value of those television deals, particularly the Big Ten network deal got more conference games out of it. So that's a trade-off. And I think that there's going to be trade-offs for each of these conferences to become part of an alliance. I think there are some things where there's going to be common ground. I think there's going to be certain things where there won't be common ground, and maybe they'll go their separate ways and agree to disagree. But still, at the end of the day, support one another on the biggest of issues. And I think the biggest of issues is the future of the playoff, access to the playoff, and then just the overall governance of college athletics, in the post-NCAA era, whatever that may look like, whether that's football branching away from the NCAA umbrella and becoming its own entity, or they disband the NCAA and you have some kind of new conglomeration of conferences and schools that run major college athletics. It's hard to say. I mean, this could be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road before you get to that point, but there are a lot of things that have kept these schools and these conferences together. I consider this to be a good thing. I don't look at it as an us versus they thing. I look at it as a like mind thing. Is let's find out what's best for our schools, our student athletes, our fans. And if it's something that fits the common good of the sport and fits the common good of all the Power Five, then so be it. Let's go in that direction. So, I don't look at it as an anti-ESPN thing necessarily. I just look at it as, hey, there's so many issues coming down the pike right at us that let's get our friends together, people who we know we can count on as a voting bloc per se, and have some type of solidarity and sort through the issues and get a common sense answer. So I don't think 8 conference games is really a better solution, in my opinion. I really don't. I think playing, for lack of a better term, playing Akron is kind of worthless. So maybe replace that with the extra game with ACC or Pac-12 or whatever. But, maybe 2 of those type games and 1 Akron game. I don't know. But at any rate, just I don't look at it as it's going to be threatening for anybody. I look at it that it's just circling the wagons and, okay, they made their move. And so now we're on the defensive. No question about it. And I say we, the other 3 conferences, are on the defensive. The best thing the Big 12 could probably do is add the Florida schools that aren't in a major conference and maybe Houston or whoever and try to make a go of that as the, quote, 5th major conference and, go at it like that. But the future of this sport, future college sports in general, it's hanging by a thread. I don't think anybody really has an idea where it's going.
I think that this alliance, until I see otherwise, just is going to be a lot of pretty words and prose and whatever, and it's not really going to amount to anything. I don't know, fool me once, fool me twice. I just, the Big Ten and Pac-10, were they the 12 at that point? I guess they may have been the 12, went into a scheduling alliance that never amounted to anything. I'm really skeptical that Washington State and Wake Forest have anything in common whatsoever. So this group of 41 teams out of 3 conferences are moving in 96 different directions, with league offices that who knows where their interests lie. So I don't know. I'm not really putting in too much faith in this at this point. I think that moving to 8 is important. Not to contradict Steve, but I think it's important just to get everybody on the same page. I think the Pac-12 needs to move to 8. I think that the Big Ten needs to move to 8, and that's kind of where we need to go with it. I still think that the Akron game is important for some regards, just to kind of prop up the non-autonomous 5 programs, let them still get some paydays, as they're going to start getting shut out of some opportunities if we see this alliance amount to something a little bit more than what I think it's going to be. But yeah, I like the idea if it does come into something of having that game, going to Corvallis and playing Oregon State and hosting Boston College. And I know BC's on the schedule already. But it is going to be difficult to get away from some of these games that you already have booked out through 2036 or whatnot. And I think there's going to be a lot of posturing and movement that's going to need to happen at this point. But I caution, once again, Ohio State dropped series against UGA and Tennessee because of this Pac-12 alliance that they had that never came to fruition. And you had to hit the reset button on getting those home and homes with SEC schools. So, I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I mean, reportedly, we're going to hear something around 2:00 today in regards to this. It sounds like it's going to be heavy on pretty words and maybe short on substance, but more to come. But I just don't necessarily put a lot of faith in how this is coming together at this point. And until I see a real plan, I'm going to just really be very dodgy on it.
I posted a video when all this news came out, admittedly playing checkers in a game of chess and saying, hey, if I had a stake in the game and had to study this for weeks and weeks on end, and again, had a stake in the game, maybe my approach would be a little bit more thought out. But In regards to the scheduling, I think that, okay, the SEC was approached by Oklahoma and Texas. So in that way, I don't blame the SEC for making the move, because the way college football is structured, everybody's in it for themselves, meaning everyone, as in every conference, is in it for themselves. There's no governing body to say, this is the way we're going to structure it. This is the AFC East, the AFC North, the AFC South, because this is best for everyone, and we're going to have balance competitively and financially. That's not the way it works. So everybody's in it for themselves. So the SEC, by accepting those two teams, knew that it was destroying the Big 12 as a Power 5 conference, that there was just no way that they would be able to maintain that status. And even putting together the likes of Houston and Memphis and whomever else isn't going to maintain that status. So the SEC fully knows that it destroyed a league by doing it. They would never admit to that. So if this alliance comes through, the only impactful way that I think that they can put this together is to say, yeah, we have a true scheduling alliance, meaning we are shutting out the SEC. They're not going to term it that way. And I'm not saying this is what they're going to do. This is what I suggest. I was thinking they would go to 9 conference games, make the ACC come up to 9, because when you get a 14-team league and you're only playing 8 conference games and leaving 5 off the schedule, it's a bit difficult. But anyway, if you go to 9 conference games, then why have a scheduling alliance if you're not committed to, you got 41 teams involved, then they need to play each other. So you're not playing with the SEC. You're basically saying, you don't state it that way, that we are scheduling non-conference games. By the time we schedule an FCS and a group of 5 on these various team schedules, we're only scheduling each other. Therefore, the SEC will have no attractive non-conference games because we've completely shut them out of the deal. And that's kind of a tit for tat there on my thought there.
Yeah, I don't think that can be done, though, because you got Florida, Florida State, South Carolina, Clemson.
You do. And
Georgia Tech, Georgia. I mean, you've got so many rivalries that are built in. Your state legislature will have a say about that, but, you know.
And we've had Texas A&M in the past, and we're having Oklahoma State. So what we've at times thought were just traditions that could not be broken in any such way have been. So I understand what you're saying, and I thought of that, and certainly maybe the red tape is too thick.
I would also add that the SEC doesn't need non-conference games to be propped up. That's what ESPN is for.
They get all their credibility from Reese Davis and
beating each other. The SEC loss,
the boys.
A loss to an SEC team is as good as a win, and so the SEC is going to go undefeated every single week by those marks.
They will in the non-conference schedule, the way I've got it arranged, because they're going to have nobody to play but a bunch of Sun Belt teams.
Well, maybe they will save the Big 12 after destroying the Big 12. Maybe that's who they use them and the AAC, and they just use that to feed themselves. They just feed on the conference that they destroyed. Like you shoot a deer and you put it in the freezer, and you just today I'll have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and Use the entire Big 12. You don't want to just use part of it. Use the entire Big 12.
All right, let's move on to our Minnesota preview here. And before we do so, Steve, the old Hall of Famer number 58 is coming after you.
Yeah, good old Jack Lambert was there. I was actually in Canton when he was put into the Hall of Fame back. I think it was around 93 or 94, maybe. I don't know. I attended that Hall of Fame. Just happened to be a year that I went, and he went to Kent State, I believe, Jack Lambert, and obviously a star for the Steelers. I replied to this in the chat. I said, "No, Jack, you're not my favorite player. My favorite player was Joe Turkey Jones, who in a game in like 76 or 77 dumped Terry Bradshaw on his head and." Rang his bell, sent him to the sideline. So when the Steelers were at the top of their powers, the Brownies always, gave him a tough game. We had honestly some good games and some good teams back there, but in the end, when it was winning time for divisions and those type things, the Steelers had us.
Absolutely. Don't get me started on old NFL history. Let's not do that. Let's talk about the future and talk about September 2nd. We got Minnesota hosting Ohio State, a rare Big Ten opener here. The Buckeyes did so at Indiana in 2017, but again, very rare. Got Daniel House on the line from Gophers Guru. Daniel, how we doing today?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Doing well, doing well. We wanted to get your take on Minnesota football. So let's start right there with basically we've got a ball club that, of course, went 11-2 with a big win against Auburn in the Outback Bowl 2 years ago. 3-4 truncated season. Defense was pretty deplorable, but all those offensive weapons come back. Tanner Morgan in particular, Ahmed Ibrahim at running back. So your take on the Gophers, quick keys to the game, and then I'm going to let these guys fire all sorts of questions at you concerning Minnesota football.
I would say this is the deepest team that PJ Fleck's had in his tenure at Minnesota, just on both sides of the ball. And it starts with the offense. I mean, the offensive line has 154 combined starts coming back. They've been shuffling Blaze Andries in training camp. He's been playing 3 or 4 different positions and 6 O-line packages, 7 O-line packages. They've been mixing up everything. Brevin Spanford, the tight end, looks like he could have a breakout year if he can stay healthy. One of the bigger question marks with Minnesota's offense is the receiver position outside of Chris Bell. Mike Brown-Stevens is looking like he might be the wide receiver 3. Daniel Jackson, a young player last year, is a really good route runner, is solidifying himself as the number 2. But the 3rd and 4th spots on that wide receiver depth chart are up for grabs. And the young freshmen, Brady Boyd, Lemecki Brockington, both have performed really well in camp. And I would not be surprised if they got a lot of reps. But, Minnesota, you look at their team with Tanner Morgan coming back. Can he restore the form to 2019? I think the coordinating change last year in the middle of a pandemic was very difficult for a lot of people involved. So we'll see how the offense shifts with Mo Ibrahim in the backfield and the dynamic between, rushing the football and passing it. Do they find a little more balance and have more early down success? And then I think on the defensive side, that's where things really fell apart last year, just not being able to stop the run at all, bottom 5 in the nation in that category. And we're able to hit the transfer portal, get some really good players. Niles Pinckney, a guy that played more than 1,100 snaps at Clemson, a national championship team. Looks like he could be the real deal. Jack Gibbons, linebacker from Abilene Christian, just jumped out when I was at practice as a really impressive-looking player, added some physicality to the second level of their defense. I would say overall Minnesota's front 7 has improved significantly. They have a lot of intriguing skill sets up there. They'll be able to rotate a lot of different guys. Boye Maffe's back, one of the top Big Ten pass rushers. I think he's added a lot more to his game, too. With Pinckney and then D'Angelo Carter, another defensive tackle in there. Defensively, I'd say the biggest question mark is the secondary. Do they have enough cornerback depth? Behind Coney Durr, Terrell Smith's probably going to be cornerback 2. Justice Harris at the nickel cornerback spot. That's definitely something I'm watching with Ohio State's explosive wide receiver core. Can they keep up with that because of the depth at the cornerback spot?
That was a good rundown. I think we're up to date on Minnesota. I guess a question I would throw out to you, Daniel, is in terms of the health of the team, have they had any key guys who have missed appreciable time in preseason camp, and are all of the mainstay players that they really seem to be leaning on, are they healthy and ready to go to start the season?
Chris Bell was injured in practice a couple weeks ago, wide receiver. He's battling some sort of injury. Sounds like he's day-to-day now, so he'll be ready for the game is the anticipation. So that's definitely something to watch if he's hobbled a little bit with that wide receiver depth on the back half of the depth chart. Otherwise, health is really good. Roster looks deep. They didn't have really any major injuries that we're aware of that, are impact players to say. I mean, I'm looking at Ohio State going, okay, like how do some of those pieces come together in the secondary, especially at cornerback? And then I'm looking at the offensive line going, wow, like you're literally going to move Munford to guard because you want to get DeJuan Jones in at tackle. So that's the intriguing matchup I'm looking forward to in this game is O-line, D-line with both teams, I think it's going to be really fun up front.
Well, I know Minnesota has like 7 or 8 offensive linemen with starting experience. So those 6 and 7 offensive line packages, is that more a product of that's the only way that's the best way for them to run the ball because the threat of the pass may not be there? How much is that related?
I don't think it's completely related. Minnesota's just trying a lot of different things in camp, especially when the media is there and not seeing as much. But I would say a couple things to watch with their offense this year is the involvement of the running backs in the passing game. Tight end has not been a prominently featured position group with PJ Fleck either. So I believe with the uncertainty in the second level of Ohio State's defense, you're going to see Minnesota try to exploit that by throwing to the backs, the tight ends, hitting things over the middle, a lot of misdirection, that type of thing. That's what I'd be looking for if I was a coordinator getting ready for this game. So, I mean, Minnesota with the passing game, there are question marks about the depth, but I think they have enough playmakers if some of these young players can step up. And I think, Dalen Wright, a guy from Texas A&M, a transfer this year, he has the physical traits. I mean, you look at him and you go, okay, this guy definitely is cut out to play receiver in the Big Ten, but he's just trying to learn the intricacies of the position. And when that clicks, he could end up being that guy that really emerges as, the wide receiver 3 and 4. And I think, I keep saying it, but that is the area that I feel like to have that offensive balance. I know teams are probably going to stack the box and force Minnesota to pass the ball to beat them. So I think that's a key. You look at Minnesota's tendencies last year. I mean, they ran the ball on first down at a 70% clip. That number went up to 80% in the second half. So they were a heavy early down tendency run the ball team. I've been saying you got to get that shifted just a little bit so you have some more predictability. The teams that beat Ohio State, you look at the tendencies going back, they all score from depth, have explosive plays, they're on schedule, and they have a lot of early down success. So that's what I'm looking for.
And Ohio State forgets that they have tight ends, at least in Iowa's instance. My question, you talk about maybe the front 7 looking better defensively for Minnesota, but it's how much of that is imported in terms of the transfer portal or whatever? And is it a concern? I mean, you have had some time to get together, but you haven't been able to go up and line up against another team, hit somebody in a jersey that's a different color. Is this really just the wrong time to draw Ohio State in week 1 versus week 5 or week 6 once these guys have had a little bit of an opportunity to gel? Because Ohio State really has proven that it can, if it's motivated to run, it can run against the best of them.
I think the advantage is going against Minnesota's experienced offensive line with all the depth they have in practice every day. The thing I notice when I'm at practice is the back and forth between the group. You don't want to go to a practice and see the defensive line just completely dominating the whole time. It's back and forth, and the reps are pretty much evenly split. And PJ Fleck said it's easily been the most competitive O-line, D-line back and forth battle this training camp. So, just looking at the group, you mentioned how much of it's with transfers. I'd say a little bit of it, but they've been developing up players like D'Angelo Carter got more reps at defensive tackle last season because PJ was like, get those guys reps. I'm not going to hold them back. Experience during the games is going to be beneficial. I honestly think like there's question marks for both teams entering this game. So it's very intriguing that it's a week 1 matchup. It's at Minnesota. I mean, this is something that I'm looking forward to seeing is just how both teams scheme because it's week 1 and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of unique wrinkles.
Yeah. One other thing, Mark,
go ahead.
If
Sure.
I may, with Tanner Morgan, like how much he's been around forever, but how much is he making the other guys better as opposed to him simply being mainly a product of Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson? Like, is he raising the level of the other guys, or has he always just been raised by the talent in the receiver room?
I would say a lot of people are really looking at 2020 and Tanner Morgan's numbers, the regression there. But I think you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. Go, okay, 2018 had a lot of explosive weapons, but you look at the traits that Tanner's really good at. It's anticipation, throwing receivers open, and he was one of the most accurate quarterbacks at throwing 20-plus yards downfield in 2019. So the problem is they Rashad Bateman was in and out. They had some question marks at receiver. The passing game just wasn't detailed. Players weren't getting separation, that type of thing. Where 2019, it was so meticulous. The passing concepts were layered. They're going from RPO to deep play action shot to drop back passing. And then the running game was thriving. So you're able to, get a defender in coverage and pull them out of the box. And that made Minnesota really hard to defend. So I think with Mike Sanford being in a full year here, I mean, PJ Fleck talked about it. He was comparing Tanner Morgan and Mike Sanford's relationship to just like not having any idea, like not being able to be around him at all. That was a lot of it. Being able to install an offense in the middle of a pandemic, it created some challenges, and he didn't really know what his players could do best. So I think you're going to see a lot of Mike Sanford's influence in the offense this year, and him and Tanner Morgan will be on the same page. So I expect Tanner to restore to form. I mean, one of the things that was interesting about him last year is he faced an 8.5 yard to go distance on second down passing the football, but he had one of the best success rates on those plays in all of college football. So he was overcoming some of their issues on early down tendencies and thriving. So I would watch for that this year. I think if Minnesota can do better on early downs, it'll help the whole offense.
My question, another one would be, into the 2019 season, they obviously win the bowl game, and they finished number 10 in the Associated Press poll at the end of the 2019 season, which is kind of like Indiana last year, something that we've never encountered in decades and decades and decades of following these programs. Just what kind of credibility did that give Fleck? And I mean, obviously last year, I think everybody just has to kind of wipe that from their memory because of COVID and injuries and everything that happened. It wasn't a representative season, I don't think, for Minnesota. I guess my question is, are they going to pick up closer to the point that they ended the 2019 season, or will this be more a carryover of 2020?
Yeah, I think Minnesota, just looking at their depth chart and how they're able to benefit from the experience that they got last season, that's been huge to elevate this program forward. And PJ Fleck's done a nice job on the recruiting trail, elevating average ratings. I wrote a piece about that. And not only that, but the development of a lot of players on the back half of the depth chart. So I see a lot of energy surrounding this program. And I believe a lot of the fans and people on the outside looking at Minnesota are factoring in the COVID-19 pandemic too, because they had games where they won at Nebraska with 33 players out. They beat Purdue with over 20 players out. I mean, there were games they did not know. They had emergency plans where defensive ends had to play defensive tackle in the Nebraska game because they were that thin, and they had guys not getting reps in practice like they wanted to. And there was just so much uncertainty. So carrying over a lot of what happened in 2019, I think you're going to see Minnesota get back to that form. A lot of the things that you saw, like I said, with the RPO to the play action to the drop back passing, some more offensive wrinkles. And then I think they'll be able to be more aggressive with their defense because they couldn't stop the run at all in 2020. I mean, teams were just going wild, and they never really even reached third down. They had the lowest third down frequency defensively of any team in the country last year. So they have to be able to get better on early downs and send more blitz pressure and get home with 4 rushers. I think that's been the priority for Minnesota, is improving their defensive line and their front 7. They did that through the transfer portal. So, I mean, I'm serious, guys, just watching Minnesota, covering Minnesota over the past 6 years. This is the deepest team they've had in that whole time frame. I mean, I left going, the physicality is there, and that's the one missing piece I felt like they didn't have fully solidified yet. And they're definitely going to be able to keep up with teams up front.
I want to ask a question about you talked a little bit about Minnesota throwing the ball and maybe trying to still identify wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. Mm-hmm. And I understand 2020 we have to kind of take with a bit of a grain of salt. It was an odd year, whatnot. Ohio State only gave up more than 150 rushing yards once, and that was in the opener to Nebraska. I'm sorry, twice, and then 157 to Alabama. But teams just didn't really run well against Ohio State. And that's really been just kind of a hallmark of Ohio State defenses. Mm-hmm. They're going to take away the run. You're going to have to try and beat them with the pass. if Ohio State is able to slow the running game down, how confident are you that Minnesota can get out there? Because I think everybody's going to take at face value that Ohio State's going to be able to move the ball and put some points up. I mean, how many remains to be seen or whatnot, but can Minnesota get into a game that ends up turning into a little bit of a track meet and get into a game where it can win with the throw game?
I think that's the biggest question mark in this game, is trying to see how these young receivers perform in a game action. I mean, there's a lot of question marks there. But having Bell and Daniel Jackson as wide receiver 1 and 2, they'll be probably rotating some of those younger players in that game. So I honestly know that, that they have to be able to pass the ball. And you're exactly right, because Ohio State's just extremely disciplined. And I think they're going to get into trouble if they start trying to force it, running the football, not having a lot of success, getting behind the sticks. Then Ohio State's front 7 will take over. So, I mean, you're going to have to be creative, install some new packages. I'd say the one thing is just attacking the second level of the defense with some of the question marks there in Ohio State's defense, mixing up fronts, mixing up packages, personnel groupings, misdirection, motion, just throwing everything out there. This is one of those games where I think Minnesota has to try to just leave it all out there. Blitz, throw a whole bunch of fronts on defense, whole bunch of trick packages, different designs. This is the first game, so I expect both teams to really install some new things. I know Ohio State, I am extremely intrigued to see how Travion Henderson's used. Is this like a sleeper thing where they have a whole bunch of design packages for him just to take advantage of his unique athleticism? That is something that I'm watching a lot.
Daniel House from Gophers Guru joining us. Daniel, I got one quick question, and then we will let you let our audience know where they can find you. You're big on the advanced analytics.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's probably less valuable to transition from 2020 to 21 because of the limited number of games and so forth, but I think everyone's viewing this Minnesota team basically as like a 7-5 run in the mill, out of contention in the Big Ten West, but a decent bowl team well within that range. And that's kind of maybe admittedly the lazy man's view of the team without really digging deep. So what analytics point to maybe making a run in the Big Ten Western Division, or maybe what metrics really concern you?
Yeah, I it's so hard to even base anything off of 2020 when it comes to analytics because of the sample size. But I would say they were a top 5 team in terms of passing efficiency in 2019. And that was a product of the scheme and the playmakers and being able to put your guys in the best position to be successful. And, the RPO game was fantastic and everyone talked about that. But the play action passing was where they really, really put pressure on teams, scoring from depth. I can't tell you how many times last year where Minnesota had an explosive passing play where the guy, didn't roll into the end zone or came up like 5 yards short. And those are the plays that you have to finish, because I'm always looking at Echo, which is one of the advanced metrics where you want to get past the 40-yard line. It's considered a productive drive. I don't want to look at time of possession. Minnesota needs to focus more on productive drives, less time of possession in this game. Try to really, really maximize your possessions and score from depth. Be explosive, because that's definitely, as I look through the trends of games with Ohio State, that's how you win. You can't try to play ball control all night, and that's one of the things that Minnesota is going to have to do, and be explosive in the passing game. And that, I know I feel like I'm a broken record, but that's what I want to see in the first game. Does Minnesota have enough wide receiver firepower to make this offense tick? Because that's what made them special in 2019, was being able to be so balanced and multidimensional offensively. So those are a few things that I'm looking for.
Daniel,
that just kind of dovetails right into Ohio State secondary with the questions that they have. Can they stop the big play?
Yeah.
And, they gave up 400 yards passing 3 times last year to Penix and Lawrence, and then the Alabama quarterback Jones as well. So if Morgan can get up over 200 and push 300, then maybe Minnesota's in this thing for the long haul.
Well, yeah, you look at last year. I mean, Ohio State, 49% opponent success rate on passing plays. That was the 14th worst mark in the country last year. So did they make enough strides there? I know Ryan Day, I was listening to him talk about a lot of the younger players on the depth chart, being impressed with them. But like Seven Banks and Cam Brown, Cam coming back from a torn Achilles. I believe Banks has missed some time in the spring as well. So like, that's what I'm interested in. Though, do you guys feel like there's a lot of uncertainty, more so at the cornerback spot than the safeties?
I think they're going to be good enough at corner. The safety with the one high safety, the free safety, to me is still the biggest question, because if they don't have a guy that can tackle and make plays back there, then everything else is screwed, basically.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good stuff, guys. Appreciate you, Daniel, joining us for a little Minnesota preview. Daniel's been joining us for quite some time here at the Voice of College Football and always delivers. So, Daniel, let people know where they can find you and your work.
You can check out my content on gophersguru.com, and the $5 a month package gets you access to the premium content, the analytics, features, and film breakdowns every week.
All right, Daniel. Well, enjoy the game, and we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, our guy Daniel House from Gophers Guru. All right, gentlemen, anything before we bid adieu?
Nothing I can think of. Just I think some suspense left at the Ohio State campus. Who's going to take this Block O jersey that Jonathan Cooper debuted last year? And I put my vote in for Haskell Garrett, given everything he was put through last year. It just seems to make sense to me that he would get honored with that recognition as a fifth-year senior guy that came back. Maybe Chris Olave, but, he moved heaven and earth to go from whatever he was, 17 down to 2. Does he really want to switch to 0? I don't know, but he would be an inspirational type guy as well on offense, I would think. So, I don't know. Those are probably my two candidates. I don't know what these guys think, or are there any other big storylines? I guess linebacker, who's going to come through at linebacker for this team, seems like a big question mark right now. But I don't know. I'll throw it into Tony and Kevin if they have any other thoughts.
I'm with you on Haskell Garrett. I think he's the betting favorite. Can't be any offensive lineman because it's not a number that an offensive lineman can wear. So. I think you're right there, and Chris Olave can't change his jersey number because it's number 2 is part of his brand, his CO2. So he's stuck there. So I think
we're going to honor you with number 0, but I can't take it. My money's tied up in number 2, guys. I can't have it.
What part of O don't you understand? CO too. I mean, yeah, it's
take your new tradition and shove it.
I mean, and I think too, and I saw Rod Favre ask in the chat as well about Palaie Naoteote, and hopefully we hear something this week on it, but we'll know when we know. I mean, he can't be going out there getting one and 2 reps really at this point, because if he doesn't get whatever from the NC2A, those are reps that just kind of go down, down for nothing. So, as soon as we hear something, I guarantee you on all the respective sites, you'll see updates. But at this point,
don't hold your breath.
I'm not aware of anything. And we know that the glacial pace that the NC2A moves at on these types of matters. So, I mean, it could be October. I don't know.
All right, guys, before we head on out, Kevin Noon right next to me, Buckeye Grove Rivals. Anything you'd like to highlight that people need to check out?
No, exciting things coming up. Just, keep it locked in. Stay tuned in with BuckeyeGrove.com. Follow me at Kevin_Noon on Twitter, and be sure to get all the information as it happens. But, expecting some big things to be coming up here in less than 10 days.
Tony.
Yep. You can find me at BuckeyeScoop.com or on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman, and podcast Buckeye Weekly is going about 5 times a week right now. So there's plenty of stuff there to listen to as we break down all of the positional interviews and the crazy goings on in college football right now.
Steve.
Nope. Just at Steve Hellwagon on Twitter, and bucknuts.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. And season is upon us, it seems. And next week will be game week. Coach Dale will have his comments on Monday. And then we'll all be traveling to Minnesota on Wednesday, and the game will be Thursday night. So here we go. We're about to go up the hill and go into this season, and here we go.
So, folks, we've been doing this for 120 weeks only because of these three. Otherwise, I'd be sitting up here by myself, and you wouldn't want that. So we've got three experts here each and every week. So we hope you appreciate their contribution. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, you can contribute there. Just mark it Ohio State. Again, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, MarkRogersTV, and please designate Ohio State. And please consider contributing because we want to do this another 120 weeks. Guys, we'll figure it out for next week. And of course, we're almost there. So appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Have a good one.
Take care.